Allied commanders were stunned by how one German radar network nearly won the air war. Section 1. The Night the Sky Watched Back. September 7th, 1940. 20,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley. The engines of the Wellington bomber thrummed steadily, a low mechanical growl vibrating through the aluminum skin of the aircraft. Inside the cramped fuselage, Flight Lieutenant James Caldwell adjusts his oxygen mask and peers through the darkness beyond the cockpit glass. Below him, Germany is invisible. No cities glowing, no rivers catching moonlight. Just a black void. That, at least, is what he expects. Then the searchlights snap on. White fingers of light claw upward from the ground, sweeping the sky with uncanny coordination. One beam finds a bomber to the left. Another locks onto a second aircraft behind. Within seconds, the darkness is broken by a lattice of light, converging with deliberate precision. Caldwell's stomach tightens. This isn't random, the navigator mutters over the intercom. It feels as though the ground itself is watching them. Moments later, the first flak bursts blossom, black puffs timed almost perfectly to the bomber stream's altitude. The aircraft shudders as fragments rattle against the fuselage. Somewhere off to the right, a bomber erupts in flame, spiraling downward in a slow, terrible arc. And then Caldwell sees it. A dark shape crosses the stars, moving with purpose. A Messerschmitt Bf 110 night fighter slides into position behind a trapped bomber, its silhouette briefly illuminated by the searchlights below. Muzzle flashes flicker. The bomber vanishes in an orange bloom. Caldwell grips the control column harder. This is not luck. This is design. Back in England, RAF Bomber Command still believes the night protects them. Daylight raids have proven too costly, and the darkness is supposed to be their shield. But over Germany in 1940, that assumption is dying quietly, methodically, under a system the Allies barely understand. On the ground below Caldwell's aircraft, in a concrete operations bunker near Dusseldorf, a German Luftwaffe officer watches the same scene unfold on a glowing green screen. Hauptmann Heinrich Keller stands with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the radar display. The lips move across the scope in clean, deliberate arcs. Each represents an aircraft. Each has a number. Each is being tracked. Contact confirmed. A radar operator calls out. Freya Station reports multiple targets entering sector Himmelbett 4. Keller nods. Vector Night Fighter 2, he says calmly. Maintain altitude. Target bearing 180. This is not chaos. It is choreography. The system Keller commands is the Kammhuber Line, named for General Josef Kammhuber, the Luftwaffe officer who envisioned an integrated air defense stretching across Western Europe. Radar stations, searchlights, anti-aircraft batteries, and night fighters are linked together in a chain of controlled zones, each one capable of detecting, illuminating, and destroying enemy bombers. It is the first network of its kind in history. Freya early warning radars detect incoming aircraft at long range. Würzburg radars provide precise tracking. Searchlights lock targets in place. Night fighters are guided by controllers like Keller, their movements dictated not by guesswork, but by data flowing through telephone lines and plotting boards. From a bomber's perspective, it feels like fate. From a German side, it is mathematics. As Caldwell's Wellington presses deeper into German airspace, the intercom crackles with clipped voices. Another bomber has gone missing. Then another. No distress calls. Just silence. The navigator leans closer to his chart, whispering calculations. The rear gunner scans the darkness behind them, finger tight on the trigger. Still they fly on. Bomber Command doctrine demands it. The targets must be hit. The losses are considered acceptable, at least for now. But as the bombers turn for home hours later, the cost becomes undeniable. Aircraft fail to return. Chairs in briefing rooms remain empty. Mechanics wait on airfields for planes that will never land. Intelligence officers begin to tally losses that make no sense for night operations. Something is wrong. In London, Air Chief Marshal Charles Portal reads the reports with growing unease. Crews insist the Germans are finding them too easily, too consistently. Night after night, Searchlights appear almost immediately. Fighters arrive with unnerving precision. It is as if the Luftwaffe knows exactly where the bombers will be. Across the channel, Josef Kammhuber studies the same nights from the opposite side. He sees proof that his system works, that Britain's bombers can be contained, even destroyed, if the net is tightened further. He pushes for expansion, more radar stations, more controlled sectors, more night fighters. If perfected, the Kammhuber Line could make large-scale bombing of Germany impossible. And for a brief, dangerous moment, it comes terrifyingly close. The Allies do not yet realize it, but the air war is changing. Not because of a new aircraft or weapon, but because the sky itself has become a battlefield of information. And Germany is winning it. Section 2. The Net Tightens. October 15, 1940. RAF Bomber Command Headquarters, High Wycombe. Rain streaks down the tall windows of the operations room, blurring the lights outside into pale smears. Inside, the air smells of tobacco, smoke, and damp wool. Maps of Western Europe cover the walls, their surfaces scarred by pins and grease pencil marks showing routes flown and aircraft lost. Air Vice Marshal Richard Pearce stands at the center table, staring down at the latest loss report. 23 aircraft missing. One night, the numbers sit on the page like an accusation. Pearce removes his glasses and rubs his eyes. He has commanded Bomber Command barely a month, and already the assumptions he inherited are collapsing. Night bombing was meant to be safer. That belief underpinned everything: training, doctrine, production priorities. But the evidence is undeniable. Crews are being intercepted with disturbing regularity. Not just near major cities or obvious targets, but along routes that should have been dark and quiet. Bombers are being caught one by one, illuminated by searchlights as if pinned in place for execution. At the front of the room, an intelligence officer clears his throat. Interrogations suggest centralized control, he says carefully. German fighters appear to be guided onto our aircraft, not patrolling randomly. A murmur ripples through the room. Guided. That word carries weight. Bomber Command has long assumed that German night fighters operate independently, relying on eyesight and luck. The idea that they are being directed, vectored precisely onto RAF aircraft, suggests a level of coordination no one expected so soon. Pearce looks up. By what? He asks. The officer hesitates. We believe radar, sir. Ground-based. The room goes quiet. Radar is not a mystery to the British. Chainholm has saved Britain during the daylight battles of the summer. But that system was designed for warning, not for controlling individual interceptions in the dark. If the Germans have gone further, if they have built something more sophisticated, then Bomber Command is flying blind into a trap. That same night, over northern France, a German radar station hums steadily beneath a low concrete dome. The Freya antenna rotates slowly, sweeping the sky with invisible pulses. On the screen, bright blips bloom and fade, marking aircraft crossing the coast. A young Luftwaffe operator calls out bearings with practiced ease. Telephone lines carry the information inland, passing through command posts to sector controllers. Everything happens quickly, smoothly, as if rehearsed, because it is. General Josef Kammhuber has divided the sky into boxes. Each Himmelbett sector is assigned its own radar coverage, searchlights, flak batteries, and a single night fighter. When a bomber enters the box, it becomes that fighter's responsibility alone. The controller tracks both aircraft, guiding the interceptor into position until the pilot can see the target, or until the searchlights trap it. It is elegant in its simplicity and brutally effective. On October 15th, a Hanley Page Hampton bomber strays slightly off course while approaching its target. Within minutes, it is detected, plotted, and illuminated. The pilot barely has time to react before cannon fire rips through the fuselage. The aircraft crashes in a field outside Amiens, killing all aboard. The controller marks the blip as extinguished. Another target enters the box. Back in England, survivors return shaken. They speak of beams of light snapping onto aircraft without warning, of fighters appearing out of nowhere, of flak bursts that seem unervingly accurate. Bomber Command analysts begin to plot the incidents on maps. Patterns emerge. Losses cluster in narrow corridors. Interceptions occur at specific distances from the coast. The same routes are proving deadly night after night. Something is funneling the bombers. By November, Pearce sends a confidential memorandum to the air staff. His language is cautious, but the meaning is clear. If current trends continue, sustained night bombing may become unsustainable. At the Air Ministry, the memo lands on the desk of Air Chief Marshal Charles Portal. He reads it slowly, then again. He knows the stakes. Britain has staked much of its long-term strategy on the bomber offensive. If the Germans have found a way to blunt it, the consequences will echo far beyond the air war. Across the Channel, Kammhuber presses his advantage. He argues for expansion of the line north and south, sealing off gaps. More Würzburg radars are installed to improve precision. Night fighter units receive better training and tighter discipline. Every success reinforces his belief that he is on the verge of achieving something unprecedented. Control of the night sky. For the men flying RAF bombers, that control is felt as dread. They continue to take off night after night, climbing into darkness that no longer feels protective. Each beam of moonlight looks like a searchlight waiting to find them. Each radio call might be the last. The net is tightening, and the Allies are only beginning to understand how close they are to being strangled by it. Section 3. Patterns in the Dark. November 28th, 1940. RAF Coastal Command Intelligence Office, London. The room is dim, lit by desk lamps and the pale glow of a light table. Maps of Europe lie layered across it, translucent sheets covered in pencil marks and grease lines. Squadron leader Edward Hastings leans over the table, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, eyes red from lack of sleep. He is not a pilot. He is an analyst. And for weeks, he has been staring at the same problem from every angle imaginable. Each red pin on the map marks a bomber that did not return. Blue pins mark those damaged but survived. At first glance, the pattern looks random. Losses scattered across Germany, France, the Low Countries. But Hastings has learned not to trust first glances. He slides another sheet into place, aligning coastlines, air routes, and timestamps. Slowly, the chaos begins to resolve into something far more unsettling. Lines. Corridors of loss. They're not hunting us, he murmurs to himself. They're waiting for us. He calls over a junior officer and asks for the latest signals intelligence summaries. Intercepts from German radio traffic. Nothing readable yet. No decrypted messages, but enough metadata to suggest heavy communications traffic clustered around specific geographic points. Radar stations, Hastings thinks. He circles areas near Bremen, Cologne, Dusseldorf, then extends the lines outward, tracing likely bomber routes. The same zones appear again and again. Later that day, Hastings presents his findings to a small group of officers. The room is quiet as he explains, using a pointer to trace invisible boxes in the sky. We believe German air defenses are organized into fixed sectors, he says carefully. Each sector appears capable of detecting, illuminating, and intercepting individual aircraft. One of the officers frowns. Individually? Yes, sir. Which means if we send aircraft through these sectors in small numbers, they can deal with them one at a time. The implication lands heavily. Bomber Command's current tactics, dispersed routes, loose timing, individual navigation, are playing directly into German hands. Another officer leans forward. Can they handle more than one bomber per sector? Hastings hesitates. We don't believe so. Not effectively. That question hangs in the air. Because if it is true, then the Germans' greatest strength may also be their weakness. Across the Channel, at a Luftwaffe command post near Münster, Hauptmann Heinrich Keller studies his own maps. His Himmelbett sector has performed well. Too well, perhaps. Interceptions are frequent, but so is strain. He has one night fighter assigned. 1. When two RAF bombers enter his sector nearly simultaneously, he must choose. Which to pursue, which to let pass. The system works best when the enemy behaves predictably. And predictability, Keller knows, never lasts in war. Still, For now, the Kammhuber Line holds. On the night of November 28th, RAF bombers fly another mission into Germany. Losses are heavy again. Crews report being intercepted even when flying evasive routes. Searchlights snap on with mechanical precision. Back in England, Hastings listens to the debriefings. One navigator describes seeing a searchlight already pointing at empty sky, then swinging directly onto his aircraft as if summoned. Another pilot swears he saw two beams converge at exactly the same moment. This is not coincidence. By early December, Hastings' conclusions reach higher levels. Bomber Command is forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Germans are not simply reacting to RAF raids. They are anticipating them. At the Air Ministry, discussions grow tense. Some argue the losses are acceptable, that Germany must be bombed regardless of cost. Others warn that continued attrition at this rate will hollow out Bomber Command before it can fulfill its strategic purpose. And beneath it all is a deeper fear. If the Germans can do this now, so early in the war, what will happen when their system improves? In a briefing room at Fighter Command headquarters, a senior officer voices the question no one wants to answer. What if they perfect it? Silence follows, because the answer is obvious. If the Kammhuber Line becomes truly airtight, the bomber offensive, the very idea of striking Germany from the air, could fail before it truly begins. That night, Hastings remains at his desk long after the building empties. He stares at the map, fingers tracing the invisible boxes in the sky. Somewhere in those boxes lies the key to survival. They just have to find it before the Germans close the net completely. Section 4. Himmelbett. December 12, 1940. Near Cologne, Germany. Snow dusts the tops of pine trees around the radar site, muffling footsteps and sound alike. Beneath a low concrete bunker, warmed only by machinery and bodies packed close together, the heart of the Kammhuber Line beats steadily. Inside, the air hums with electricity. A Würzburg radar dish outside tracks a single bright echo moving across its scope. The blip represents an RAF bomber, alone in the night, flying at what its crew believes is safe altitude. On the plotting table, a Luftwaffe corporal moves a small marker along a grid, updating its position every few seconds with quiet precision. Hauptmann Heinrich Keller stands over him, stopwatch in hand. Maintain track, Keller says. Night Fighter 1 is climbing. Over the radio, the pilot's voice crackles back, calm and professional. He cannot see the bomber yet. He does not need to. Keller can see both aircraft on the board. He knows their altitudes, headings, speeds. This is Himmelbett in practice. The name is almost gentle, canopy bed. In reality, it is a killing zone. The RAF bomber crosses an invisible line on the map. Searchlights ignite instantly, sweeping upward in tight arcs. One beam finds nothing. Another grazes cloud. A third locks on. The bomber is caught. Inside the aircraft, panic surges. The pilot throws the Wellington into evasive maneuvers, engines roaring as the nose dips and climbs. The beam follows relentlessly, pinning the aircraft against the sky like an insect under glass. Target illuminated, Keller says into the microphone. Close to visual. The night fighter sees it now, a black shape against silver cloud, outlined by harsh white light. He pushes the throttles forward and closes the distance. Cannon fire flashes. In seconds, the bomber is ablaze. From Keller's position, the kill is almost abstract. The blip vanishes from the radar screen. A line is drawn through a number on a board. Another mission neutralized. Outside, wreckage burns in a frozen field. This scene repeats itself dozens of times across occupied Europe. Each Himmelbett sector operates independently, efficiently, deadly when conditions are right. The limitation is clear, but manageable. One bomber at a time. And that is why the system works. Back in England, Bomber Command grapples with growing desperation. Loss rates approach levels that cannot be sustained long-term. Squadrons struggle to replace experienced crews. Training pipelines strain under pressure. At High Wycombe, Air Vice Marshal Pears convenes another late-night meeting. Intelligence off. They can only handle one aircraft per box, he says, pointing. If two enter simultaneously, one often escapes. Someone leans forward. What if 10 entered? The room stills. Hastings exhales. Then the system breaks. It is a radical thought. Bomber Command has built its night strategy around dispersion, spreading aircraft out to avoid collisions and flak concentrations. Now, the evidence suggests that concentration might be the answer instead. Send bombers not scattered but together. A single, dense stream. Overwhelm each Himmelbett sector by sheer numbers, forcing German controllers to choose and fail. The proposal is controversial. Navigation at night is already difficult. Collisions are a real risk, and putting bombers close together seems to invite disaster if German flak finds the stream. But the alternative is worse. Continue as they are, and the Kammhuber Line will grind Bomber Command down piece by piece. Portal reviews the idea carefully. He understands its implications. This is not just a tactical adjustment. It is a doctrinal reversal, an admission that the enemy has seized control of the night, and that control must be wrested back through innovation. Meanwhile, Kammhuber senses trouble. Reports from sector commanders indicate increasing strain. On several nights, multiple RAF bombers enter the same Himmelbett within minutes of each other. Controllers struggle to manage the workload. Fighters are stretched thin. Kammhuber requests additional night fighter squadrons. He pushes for overlapping sectors, more radars, tighter control. But resources are finite. Aircraft are needed elsewhere. Radar production cannot be magically accelerated. The system is powerful, but brittle. Neither side fully understands yet how close the balance has become. On the night of December 12th, another RAF bomber stream crosses into Germany. Losses are still heavy, but a few aircraft slip through zones that should have been deadly. Small cracks appear in the net. They go unnoticed at first. But in war, cracks have a way of widening fast. Section 5. The Weight of Numbers. January 30th, 1941. North Sea, outbound from England. The bomber lifts into the cold night air, engines straining as it claws for altitude. Inside the fuselage, Sergeant William Bill Harper checks his instruments by red light, the familiar ritual offering a thin sense of control. He has flown this route before. What feels different tonight is the radio chatter. Constant, clipped, crowded. There are too many voices. Ahead of him, he can see navigation lights, brief pinpricks of red and green. Then another set, and another. Aircraft silhouettes drift in and out of cloud, closer than regulations ever allowed before. Bomber Command has changed the rules. For the first time, large numbers of aircraft are being routed along the same corridor, time to arrive over enemy territory within minutes of one another. Not a formation in the daylight sense. No tight V-shapes, but a continuous river of bombers flowing through the sky. A bomber stream. Harper doesn't know the theory behind it. He only knows the feeling, claustrophobic, dangerous, electric. One wrong move could mean collision. One slip of concentration could be fatal. Yet as they cross the coast of occupied Europe, something strange happens. The searchlights do not snap on immediately. When they do, they seem overwhelmed. Beams sweeping frantically, locking onto one aircraft, then losing it as three more pass through the same patch of sky. Flak bursts appear, but they are sporadic, poorly timed. The night fighters still come, but not like before. Over a Himmelbett sector near Essen, Hauptmann Heinrich Keller watches his plotting table fill faster than ever. Blips crowd the screen, overlapping, merging, separating again. His corporal struggles to keep markers updated. The telephone rings constantly. Reports stack up faster than they can be processed. Which target? The night fighter pilot demands over the radio. Keller hesitates. There are too many. He chooses one, an aircraft at slightly lower altitude, lagging behind the mainstream. The fighter moves to intercept, guided as best Keller can manage. But even as the interception unfolds, more bombers cross the sector unchallenged. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and exactly what it cannot handle. That night, losses still occur. Bombers are shot down. Crews are killed. But for the first time in months, the numbers shift. More aircraft return than intelligence officers predicted. More bombs fall on targets that should have been defended. Back in England, debriefing rooms buzz with cautious excitement. Crews report confusion on the ground. Searchlights chasing the wrong aircraft. Fighters arriving late, or not at all. Analysts like Squadron Leader Hastings pore over the data, pulse quickening as patterns confirm his hypothesis. Concentration works. The Kammhuber Line, brilliant as it is, cannot scale fast enough. Portal reads the reports with a mixture of relief and grim resolve. This is not victory, but it is breathing room. Across the channel, Josef Kammhuber feels the pressure tighten around him. He argues fiercely with Luftwaffe leadership, warning that bomber streams threaten to nullify his carefully constructed system. He proposes denser radar coverage, multiple fighters per sector, flexible control zones. Some of his ideas are accepted. Others are rejected as impractical. The truth is painful. The Kammhuber Line was built for a certain kind of war, and that war is already changing. In the nights that follow, Bomber Command refines the tactic. Streams become denser. Timing improves. Losses fluctuate, but the trend is clear. The sky is no longer Germany's alone. For men like Bill Harper, the difference is felt not in strategy rooms, but in survival. He lands back in England after a long night, engines coughing as they spool down. He climbs out of the aircraft, legs shaking alive. That is enough. The contest has entered a new phase, not of weapons, but of ideas. Radar versus mathematics. Control versus saturation. And neither side is finished adapting yet. Section 6. The Invisible Battle. March 18th, 1941. Air Ministry, London. The room is quiet except for the low hum of electrical equipment and the scratch of pencils on paper. Heavy blackout curtains seal the windows, turning midday into perpetual dusk. Around a long table sit men who rarely see combat, yet shape it nightly. Scientists, intelligence officers, and senior RAF commanders. This is where the war inside the war is being fought. At one end of the table, Dr. Reginald Victor Jones stands with his notes neatly arranged. Young, intense, and relentlessly analytical, Jones has been tasked with understanding German radio and radar technology, and more importantly, how to defeat it. He listens as an officer describes recent raids. Bomber streams have improved survival rates, but losses remain high in certain sectors. German night fighters still find targets with unnerving accuracy under the right conditions. Jones speaks quietly, but the room leans in. They are not seeing our aircraft directly, he says. They're seeing reflections. Echoes. Radar pulses bounce off aluminum skin and return to their receivers. That basic principle has saved Britain once, and now threatens it. Jones proposes something audacious. What if, he says, choosing his words carefully, we give them too many echoes? The idea sounds almost childish at first. Aluminum strips, cut to precise lengths, drop from bombers to create clouds of false radar returns. On German scopes, a single bomber would appear as hundreds. Entire bomber streams could vanish inside a blizzard of noise. The concept is codenamed Window. There is immediate resistance. Some fear the Germans will copy it instantly and blind Britain's own defenses. Others argue it is a desperate gamble, one that could backfire catastrophically. Jones does not argue emotionally. He presents calculations, probabilities, timelines. If we do nothing, he says calmly, the enemy will continue improving. If we act, we disrupt them now, when disruption matters most. The decision is deferred, but the seed is planted. Across the channel, Josef Kammhuber senses that something fundamental is slipping from his grasp. Night fighter reports grow inconsistent. Radar returns become cluttered. Operators complain of difficulty distinguishing real targets from phantom ones. For now, it is manageable, but unease spreads. Kammhuber orders tighter discipline, improved filtering techniques, and additional training for radar crews. He knows technology alone is not enough. People matter. Judgment matters. Still, he cannot shake the feeling that the enemy is probing for something deeper than numbers. Back in the air, Bomber Command pushes harder. Streams grow larger. Routes shift. The Germans respond with adjustments of their own, overlapping sectors, additional fighters, experimental airborne radar sets. Each night becomes a chess match played at 300 miles per hour in total darkness. For bomber crews, the invisible battle manifests as sudden chaos. One night, searchlights miss them entirely. The next, a fighter appears from nowhere. No pattern holds for long. Sergeant Bill Harper feels it keenly. On a raid over Hamburg, his aircraft flies through a patch of sky that should be heavily defended. Nothing happens. Minutes later, flak erupts unexpectedly far from any target. No one knows what they're doing anymore, his navigator mutters. That uncertainty cuts both ways. The Kammhuber Line is no longer the clean, ordered machine it once was. It is straining, adapting, improvising, just like its enemy. By mid-1941, Allied commanders begin to understand how close they came to disaster. Had the Germans expanded faster? Had bomber streams been delayed? Had men like Jones not asked the right questions at the right moment? The air war might have tipped the other way. Instead, it teeters, balanced on innovation, nerve, and the relentless pressure of adaptation. And the most decisive blow has not yet been struck. Section 7. Night of 1,000 Ghosts. July 24th, 1943. RAF Scampton, Lincolnshire. The sun has just dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a smear of orange light that fades quickly into gray. On the tarmac, Lancaster bombers sit in long, patient rows, their black fuselages absorbing the last warmth of the day. Ground crews move briskly, voices low, movements precise. There is something different in the air tonight, an edge of secrecy even the veterans can feel. Inside the briefing room, curtains drawn tight, Air Vice Marshal Ralph Cochrane waits until every seat is filled. He lets the silence stretch before speaking. Gentlemen, he begins, tonight we change the rules. Maps are uncovered. Hamburg. Operation Gemara. But it is not the target that draws the most attention. It is the final instruction, delivered quietly, almost casually. At the coast, Cochrane says, you will deploy window. For many crews, the word means little. They have been told only what they need to know, thin strips of foil bundled carefully to be dropped at timed intervals. No one explains exactly how it works. They are simply told that it may save their lives. In one Lancaster, Flight Lieutenant Peter Lawson fingers the edge of a packet tucked near his station. It weighs almost nothing. It does not look like a weapon. As engines roar to life and bombers lift into the darkening sky, no one knows for certain what will happen. Across the North Sea, German radar stations are already alert. The Würzburg scopes glow green in their huts, operators scanning for the first signs of the incoming raid. At first, everything appears normal, blips forming along the coast, plotting courses inland. Then the screens begin to bloom. Returns multiply rapidly, overlapping, smearing into vast luminous clouds. Individual tracks dissolve into chaos. Operators shout for clarification. Controllers try to assign fighters, but cannot tell where the real bombers are, or how many. One radar technician stares at his scope in disbelief. Das ist unmöglich, hey Mutters. This is impossible. Searchlights sweep blindly into empty sky. Night fighters scramble and circle, guided by instructions that contradict one another. Pilots report seeing nothing, then suddenly, too much. Above Hamburg, the bomber stream passes through largely unchallenged. Sergeant Bill Harper feels it immediately. The usual tension, the expectation of flak, the tightening of the chest as they cross the defended zones, never arrives. They fly on, engines steady, crew members exchanging cautious glances. Where is it? Someone asks over the intercom. There is no answer. Bombs fall. Fires ignite. The city below becomes a spreading inferno, heat columns punching upward into the night sky. But the true devastation unfolds unseen inside the German command structure. Josef Kammhuber is summoned from his quarters as reports flood in. Radar screens overwhelmed. Fighters ineffective. Losses minimal on the Allied side. He arrives to find his system in collapse. This is not a tactical failure. It is a conceptual one. The Kammhuber Line was built on order, clear sectors, precise tracking, controlled interception. Window destroys that order in minutes. The very strength of the system becomes its weakness. It cannot function without clarity. Kammhuber demands explanations, fixes, countermeasures. Technicians scramble to adjust frequencies, filters, gain controls. Nothing works fast enough. By dawn, the reality is unavoidable. The enemy has cracked the code. In London, the mood is restrained but electric. Analysts pore over lost figures that seem almost unreal. Bomber Command has suffered damage, yes, but nothing like the slaughter of earlier raids. Dr. R.V. Jones reads the reports slowly, carefully. He allows himself no celebration. He knows the Germans will adapt. They always do. But for this moment, the balance has shifted. Allied commanders finally understand just how close they came to losing the air war before it truly began. For nearly 2 years, German radar had shaped every decision, every route, every casualty list. Now, with a handful of aluminum strips, that invisible net has been torn open. The night sky will never be the same again. Yet victory is not automatic. Hamburg burns, but the war continues. The Germans will respond with new tactics, new technologies, new dangers. The invisible battle has entered a new phase, one where deception becomes as lethal as firepower. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, radar screens flicker back to life, searching for meaning in the noise. Section 8. The Germans strike back. August 1943. Berlin. The morning light filters weakly through the tall windows of the Air Ministry, illuminating faces drawn tight with exhaustion. The shock of Hamburg has not faded. It has hardened into anger. Josef Kammhuber stands before a table cluttered with after-action reports, radar plots, and handwritten notes scrawled in haste during the night of catastrophe. He listens as engineers speak in clipped, technical bursts, each sentence confirming what he already knows. The enemy has learned how to blind them. Würzburg operators describe screens flooded with false echoes, entire sectors drowning in phantom aircraft. Freya stations report the same. Attempts to narrow beams, reduce sensitivity, or switch frequencies brought only momentary clarity before the chaos returned. Night fighter pilots complain of being vectored toward ghosts, arriving at assigned intercept points to find nothing but darkness and drifting smoke. Kammhuber closes his eyes briefly, then opens them with resolve. The system will adapt or it will die. Orders go out within hours. Radar crews are instructed to experiment relentlessly, to find patterns in the noise. Some operators begin adjusting receiver gain manually, learning to recognize the distinctive shimmer of window returns. Others experiment with plotting speed and altitude changes, trying to separate real aircraft from stationary clouds of chaff. Night fighter units receive new guidance. They are to rely less on ground control and more on airborne interception radar. Liechtenstein sets are upgraded where possible, their crews trained to trust what they see directly ahead rather than what distant controllers tell them. In the skies over Germany, the war resumes with ferocity. On August 17th, American B-17s appear over Schweinfurt and Regensburg in daylight, bristling with defensive guns. German radar tracks them easily. Window is a night weapon, and the Americans have not yet adopted it. Fighters slash into the bomber boxes, cannon fire ripping through aluminum skins. The contrast is brutal and instructive. Radar is still powerful, but is no longer invincible. Back in Britain, Bomber Command planners digest the lessons of Hamburg carefully. Window is rationed. It is not used on every raid. Surprise must be preserved. Crews are drilled on timing and dispersal. Too much chaff dropped too early could warn the Germans. Too little, and the net tightens again. Wing Commander Guy Gibson, recently returned from the Dams raid, listens intently during briefings. He understands instinctively what this change means. The war in the air is becoming a contest of minds as much as machines. Night after night, Bombers stream across the channel. Sometimes the chaff works perfectly. He calls out corrections to his controller, who hesitates, then vectors a Bf-110 into position. Minutes later, a Lancaster is burning, spiraling down through cloud. It is a small victory, but it proves the Germans are not finished. Yet the scale has changed. The bomber streams are thicker now, more concentrated. Where once raids trickled through individual Himmelbett boxes, now hundreds of aircraft overwhelm entire regions at once. Even when German fighters find their targets, there are too many others slipping through. Kammhuber argues fiercely with Göring over resources. He wants more radar sets, more trained operators, more authority to restructure the system entirely. Göring, under pressure from Hitler, demands results instead of explanations. The English are not magicians, Göring snaps. They bleed like anyone else. But numbers do not lie. Despite improvements, the defense cannot regain its former dominance. In the autumn of 1943, Kammhuber is sidelined, his influence waning. The system that bears his name continues to operate, but without the coherence it once possessed. The air war has outgrown it. For Allied commanders, the lesson is sobering. They review intelligence summaries showing how close Bomber Command came to collapse in 1941 and early 1942. Without window, without mass streams, without relentless experimentation, the night skies over Europe might have remained a killing ground. Instead, the balance has tipped. But the cost is still measured in lives, burning aircraft, and cities reduced to ash. The radar war has not ended. It has simply evolved into something faster, deadlier, and far more complex. Above the clouds, engines drone on, carrying crews who know now that survival depends not just on courage, but on invisible battles fought far beyond the reach of flak and fighters. Section 9. The invisible front expands. Winter 1943. High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire. Snow presses against the windows of Bomber Command headquarters, muffling the outside world. Inside, the atmosphere is anything but quiet. Cigarette smoke hangs low as officers cluster around tables littered with maps, signal intercepts, and technical diagrams. The war in the air has entered a new phase, and everyone in the room knows it. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris stands with his hands braced against the edge of the table, eyes fixed on a map of Germany scarred with red pins. His voice is steady, but there is steel beneath it. The Germans are adapting, he says. So will we. Across the room, Dr. R.V. Jones listens carefully. He has spent years warning the technology would decide the fate of this war as surely as guns and bombs. Now, the evidence is undeniable. Radar, counter-radar, deception, counter-deception, an invisible front stretching from the English coast deep into the Reich. New intelligence arrives almost daily. Prisoners speak of radar operators trained to recognize window patterns. Reconnaissance photos reveal new antenna arrays, some unfamiliar, others modified in haste. Signals analysts detect subtle changes in German frequencies. The enemy is learning. In response, British scientists push forward relentlessly. Window is refined, cut to different lengths to confuse multiple radar bands. New jamming transmitters are tested, crude at first, then increasingly sophisticated. Entire squadrons are dedicated not to bombing, but to electronic attack, aircraft that fly alongside the bomber stream, filling the ether with noise. One such aircraft, a modified Halifax, carries a crew whose weapons are dials and switches rather than guns. Flying Officer Alan Price watches his instruments glow softly as he adjusts output levels, carefully following instructions drilled into him for weeks. Steady now, his navigator murmurs. They'll be listening. Over Germany, radar stations strain to make sense of the flood. Operators complain of headaches, of eyes burning from hours staring at distorted screens. Controllers argue over which contacts are real, which are deception. Night fighters are scrambled late, vectored poorly, their pilots furious and frightened in equal measure. Yet occasionally, the Germans strike back with terrifying effectiveness. On a cold January night, A bomber stream bound from Magdeburg runs headlong into a pocket of unexpectedly accurate interception. Fighters appear suddenly out of cloud, cannon fire tearing into wings and fuselages. In minutes, the sky is full of falling aircraft, burning debris marking the bomber route like a trail of flares. Back in England, casualty lists grow again. Harris slams his fist against the table when the reports arrive. "They're finding gaps," he growls. "That means we change again." The realization spreads through Allied command. There will be no permanent solution. Every advantage is temporary. Every breakthrough invites a counter. In Berlin, new radar projects receive priority funding despite the strain on Germany's war economy. Engineers work long nights on improved Würzburg sets, passive detection systems that listen instead of transmit, and experiments in infrared tracking. Some ideas show promise. Others never leave the drawing board. Hitler is briefed personally. He listens impatiently, uninterested in technical nuance. "Destroy their cities," he says. "Break their will." But the bomber streams keep coming. By mid-1944, the scale of the air war dwarfs anything seen before. Thousands of aircraft cross Europe in a single night. Radar coverage, no matter how advanced, cannot cope with such numbers. The sky itself becomes saturated. Young German radar operators, once confident masters of a cutting-edge system, now feel hunted. Their stations are bombed deliberately, antennas twisted wreckage amid smoking huts. Survivors are reassigned, retrained, sent back into a fight that feels increasingly unwinnable. In Allied briefing rooms, commanders quietly acknowledge the truth. Without the early success of the Kammhuber Line, without the losses inflicted, Bomber Command might never have evolved into the force it has become. The enemy taught them how to fight this war by nearly winning it first. The invisible battle has reshaped doctrine, technology, and strategy on both sides. It has turned scientists into warriors and radio waves into weapons. And as the war pushes toward its climax, one lesson stands above all others. Control of the sky no longer belongs solely to the fastest aircraft or the heaviest guns, but to those who can see, deceive, and think faster than their enemy ever expects. Section 10. The Night Fighter's Last Advantage. March 1944. Near Münster, Germany. The airfield is slick with melting snow and oil, the ground crew's boots leaving dark impressions as they hurry between revetments. A Junkers Ju 88G sits idling at the edge of the runway, its twin engines coughing clouds of exhaust into the cold air. Inside the cockpit, Oberleutnant Werner Streib adjusts his headset, listening to the crackle of radio traffic layered with static and urgency. This is no longer the war he once knew. Ground control feeds him vectors, but the confidence that once defined those instructions is gone. Bearings are approximate now. Altitudes uncertain. The sky is full of lies. Still, Streib has one remaining edge. His aircraft carries the latest version of the Liechtenstein SN-2 airborne radar, its aerials bristling like skeletal antlers from a nose. Unlike the ground station's drowning in window, his radar peers forward into the darkness, searching for shape and motion rather than clouds of echoes. At 22,000 feet, he picks up a contact. "Contact Voraus," he says calmly, throttling back slightly. His radar operator calls out range and closing speed. Somewhere ahead, a Lancaster crew flies unaware, engines droning steadily as they follow the bomber stream toward the Ruhr. For a moment, the old system still works. Streib closes to visual range. The Lancaster fills the windscreen, a dark silhouette against a faintly glowing horizon. Cannon fire erupts, short and brutal. The bomber shudders, flames licking from its wing root before it slips away into the void below. A kill, but it is a fleeting triumph. As Streib turns away, his radar fills with contacts again. Too many. Bombers everywhere, layered in altitude, spread across miles of sky. He cannot chase them all. Fuel ticks downward. Ammunition is finite. Around him, other night fighters struggle. Some never find targets. Others collide in cloud and confusion. A few are shot down by bomber gunners who have grown far more aggressive, far more experienced. Back at command, controllers watch their plots dissolve into chaos once more. The bomber stream has widened. Losses are still painful, but survivable. The balance has shifted decisively. Air Vice Marshal Edward Addison reads the summary slowly, then looks up. They're fighting blind, he says, but they're still dangerous. That understanding shapes everything that follows. Radar sites are struck deliberately. Electronic warfare units expand. The Americans, now flying deep daylight penetrations, begin experimenting seriously with window themselves, integrating it into their own doctrine. By the summer of 1944, the sky over Europe is no longer contested in the same way. The Luftwaffe fights bravely, often brilliantly, but always reactively. Its radar network, once the unseen hand guiding death with precision, has become fragmented and overstretched. The final irony is not lost on those who study the war closely. The Kammhuber Line did not fail because it was flawed. It failed because it was too successful, so effective that it forced the Allies to reinvent aerial warfare entirely. As Strybe lands in the early hours of the morning, engines winding down in the pale gray light, he removes his helmet and sits quietly for a moment. He knows, even if no one says it aloud, that the tide has turned for good. The invisible war that nearly won Germany control of the night skies has been beaten, not by brute force alone, but by imagination, deception, and relentless adaptation. And somewhere beyond the horizon, new aircraft are already forming up, engines warming, radio waves humming with plans designed to shatter what remains of the enemy's sight. Section 11. The Sky Opens Forever. June 5, 1944. Southern England. Low cloud drifts across the moon, turning airfields into islands of shadow and light. Along the perimeter tracks, aircraft stand wingtip to wingtip. Lancasters, Halifaxes, Sterlings, Dakotas, far more than on any previous night. The ground hums with restrained urgency. Engines are warmed, radios checked. Crews move quietly, aware that what is about to begin will decide the war in Western Europe. This time, the radar war is not a supporting act. It is central. Inside a converted manor house, serving as an operations center, Allied officers track the unfolding plan for Operation Neptune, the airborne and naval prelude to D-Day. On the walls, large charts show German radar coverage like veins across northern France and the Low Countries. Each one has been studied, tested, and prepared for. Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory listens as a signals officer reports final readiness. Mandrill units standing by. Window stocks confirmed. Carpet jammers airborne in 10 minutes. Across the channel, German radar stations are already alert. Operators know something is coming. The question is where. Just after midnight, the first deception begins. Window pours from aircraft flying deliberate, carefully plotted routes toward the Pas-de-Calais. Radar screens bloom once more with ghost fleets, vast formations seemingly headed for the narrowest crossing point. Controllers react instantly, ordering fighters to scramble, artillery to stand by, reserves to prepare. It is exactly what the Allies want. Further west, real aircraft slip through gaps, torn open by jamming and chaff. Pathfinders mark drop zones. Paratroopers pour into the darkness. Gliders descend silently toward fields and hedgerows. In one Würzburg bunker near Cherbourg, a young operator grips his headset, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. His screen is alive with motion, returns flickering and merging. He tries to separate truth from deception, but everything looks real. Multiple contacts, he reports. All directions. His controller hesitates, then commits fighters toward the largest cluster, the false one. By dawn, the truth is undeniable. Allied troops are ashore in Normandy. The radar network, once Germany's greatest unseen shield, has been manipulated at the decisive moment. For Allied commanders, the realization is profound. The Kammhuber Line had nearly strangled Bomber Command in its infancy. Now, Its defeat enables the largest amphibious invasion in history. In the weeks that follow, German radar sites are systematically destroyed or captured. Antennas fall. Operators are killed, captured, or scattered. Some stations continue to function briefly, feeding information into a shrinking command structure that no longer has the fighters or fuel to act on it. Back in Britain, analysts compile final assessments. They trace the arc from 1940 to 1944, from the first Freya plots over the North Sea to the blinding clouds of window that broke the system open. The conclusion is stark. Had the Germans extended and refined the Kammhuber Line faster, had the Allies delayed adopting countermeasures, had a handful of scientists failed to convince skeptical commanders of what was coming, the outcome of the air war might have been very different. Instead, the Allies learned, adapted, and turned invisibility into a weapon. Long after the guns fall silent, the legacy remains. Integrated air defense, electronic warfare, radar deception. These are no longer experiments. They are permanent features of modern war, born in the dark skies over Europe. The men who flew and fought rarely spoke of radio waves and frequencies. They remembered only the fear, the sudden flares of cannon fire, the relief of seeing dawn. But above them all, unseen and relentless, another battle had been fought, one that nearly won the war before the world even understood it was happening.